The 2023 Busch Clash is in the books now, and to say that there was a ton to talk about is definitely understating just how much action there was, both good and bad. So today, we're going to look back at the good, the bad, and the whole lot of ugly in the 2023 Busch Clash. And while there is a lot of negative, let's start off on the positive side. Believe it or not, there actually was a lot of good coming from last night. Yeah, there were a lot of people online that weren't happy with different things. This was not a normal NASCAR race by any means, just like last year's edition of this race wasn't. But to say that this was all bad is being disingenuous. There was a ton that was really fun to watch, and especially in the early parts of the racing and broadcast, honestly, I was having a ton of fun. From what I heard from friends of mine, they were having a ton of fun at the race, and the atmosphere was a lot like last year's. Just a fun overall experience. And that's something good. To have a fun experience, to have that be the connecting word to the at-track experience for a race that is designed for fans outside of this normal space is accomplishing the mission. This race was not meant to be something that was going to hook diehards in and year out. Diehards like me are going to watch no matter what kind of race or where they're at. But these newer fans, these Los Angeles fans that NASCAR wants, they finally found a way to connect at least with some of them. Now, to say that this is going to be a surefire plan for the next 15 to 20 years, no, this is something that probably is going to work itself out in the next 2 or 3. But the way that it is right now has worked. The heat races, for instance, those races, in my opinion, were better than the main, and I think were the best part of the night. You had drivers who were actually desperate to get positions. You had drivers who were really good getting eliminated, like a Brad Keselowski. Even if he isn't elite like he used to be, he is still a pretty big name to get eliminated from this race. One of the few to get eliminated because of what we'll talk about in a bit with too many cars. There were less cars on a smaller track, and there was the ability to actually race. Yes, there were cautions, there were spins, there were dumb incidents. That's something that's going to happen no matter what. But these races felt like actual races. They felt like an actual taste into what NASCAR was really like, and it's a shame that more people didn't show up for them at the track and probably on TV as well. And speaking of the at-the-track crowd, yes, this was not as big of a crowd as last year. I get that. But it wasn't like this crowd was awful. The social media reaction, much like all social media reaction, was incredibly overblown about the attendance. It was probably about 40 to 45,000 there, which was not around the 50 to 60,000 they had last year, and it definitely looked a lot more empty on the backstretch, especially when you looked at the ticket sales on Ticketmaster on NASCAR's website, and you saw tons of open seats. Now, a lot of them did get filled up, but it still definitely is something to note that it was a smaller crowd, but it was not a bad crowd by any means. It was honestly a normal, good crowd for a normal race. If we got that crowd at Martinsville, people would be singing praises about how many people were at that race. But because it's a race that a lot of diehards don't want to succeed, suddenly it's the end of the world and it's a total failure. You can't have both. It's either a good crowd or it's not a good crowd. One or the other, make up your mind. Now, I do think that some things are unavoidable when it comes to the crowd, though, being smaller, and some things aren't. For one, it's a year 2 compared to a year 1. That big splash that this race made last year is not going to be made in 2023. A later start time as well with LA traffic is not going to help your case to bring more people in before Wiz Khalifa performs. And then also there's no Super Bowl in town, so a lot of that normie hype of people who are there for a week and can go to a race just as something to try as their LA experience, that's not going to be there. I'm not saying these as excuses, I'm just saying these are probably some reasons both that NASCAR can and can't control for why this is the case. And something that can be controlled is something else I thought was really good. The Fox booth. Not Fox as a whole, just the booth. Mike Joy is Mike Joy. Even if he's lost a step, that lost step is still a million steps ahead of a normal broadcasting person. There's not much you can really say. Mike Joy is a national treasure. Clint Bowyer, on the other hand, seems to have been toned back just a bit, and I appreciate that because Bowyer's Bowyerisms were pretty damn bad in years past. And Tony Stewart is incredibly insightful and has a lot of chemistry with Mike and Clint. If he were to be the one that could be in the booth outside of maybe Kevin Harvick, I wouldn't mind it whatsoever if he was a full-timer. But that's just my thoughts on those. As for the rivalries, that is another good thing to come out of this. Denny Hamlin versus Ross Chastain is alive and well, and I am here for all of that. Those two were one of the most fun parts of last year, and it looks like we may have the beginnings of a long-standing rivalry. Chase Briscoe versus AJ Allmendinger was pretty fun to watch in frickin' practice. And then Kyle Busch versus Joey Logano seems to be continuing, as Kyle Busch basically called Logano a two-faced asshole. The first big part of the bad was the reaction to, as well as some of the execution of the musical acts. Now let's start with the reaction. NASCAR fans, in a lot of ways, get in their own way. They want the sport to expand, to grow, to get better, but then when NASCAR does different things, they'll complain about it, say how bad it is, and that they need to go back to the old country bumpkins that they had before. Well, country is not going to sell in LA the way that Wiz Khalifa would or Cypress Hill would. And NASCAR fans have never been huge on rap. We knew this was going to be a big issue, as even last year when we had Ice Cube at the race, people still were pretty upset with it, even though, honest to God, it wasn't all that bad whatsoever. Now, I'll say this, Cypress Hill is definitely old. Their age definitely showed in their performance, and seeing how a lot of the stands from the camera shots Fox showed weren't really moving, it seemed like a pretty flat affair, though some at the track said it wasn't as bad. Now, back to the more racing-centric bad, the pre-race was way too damn long. It felt like they were grasping at straws for different content, and you saw a lot of Fox Sports' dumb little gimmicks that they had, and a lot of the cheese that they had in their previous broadcasts. And I think that if you had condensed it down, maybe had just an hour of race day, cut out the filler and had just the stuff to the point, cover what's changed, cover what's up with the LA Coliseum, and cover what's coming up with the Daytona 500, you'd have a much more clear, concise, and, in all honesty, compelling pre-race show that would get you right up to the event, or events when it came to the heat races. But 6 hours, including the heat races, a pre-race, is way too much, and it needs to be fixed. And speaking of stuff in that pre-race with the heat races, Gwen Stefani had a lot of chemistry in the booth with Bowyer as their friends, but man, they were way, way too off topic. Now, one big thing also that's really bad is the fact, and this isn't the race itself that really brought this, as much more NASCAR talking about it before the race. They might have a points race at the Coliseum. After what we saw with 27 cars on track, which I fully expect that to be because they were using it to test this kind of idea, I think it's a horrible one, and they better not do it, because this would be absolutely ugly for the sport, and honestly, I think it would be a bigger embarrassment than anything either Clash could do. And now for the ugly, the second half. Just the entire second half of the race was ugly, embarrassing. It was every NASCAR stereotype you could think of. They're turning left and they're crashing into each other. That's the stereotype that people will probably think, especially in the LA area. I'm guaranteeing you a lot of people who had never seen a NASCAR race probably had a lot of their stereotypes filled and understood by the way the second half of that race went. The first half was solid. Honest to God, it felt like they could pass a lot better this year. And it also then seemed like it was completely wasted because they wanted to play glorified bumper cars in the second half of this race. There were too many damn cars out there. 27 cars is way too many. Honestly, 20 might be too many. I think going back to the old formats of the Clash and maybe making it where only 16 to 18 get in would be the best possible way to have real racing spread out, good, long, short runs, different stuff like that, and you can actually give a taste of your product to these new people you're trying to draw in. Instead, like I said, we had bumper cars and demolition derbies. With the caution flag laps not counting, it also made the race go way too long, and ultimately went over Fox Sports' window for it, which is inexcusable for an exhibition like this when you're going almost an hour over the time window. As for the at-track experience that was ugly, Ticketmaster messing up the times again. They had the main starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. It started at 5 p.m. Pacific Time. That is egregious. That is something that, in my opinion, will draw down a lot of attendance as well. When the people going to the race, if they're casuals, don't know when the race is starting, because when they look on the website, it says 5 p.m. Pacific Time, but when they look on Ticketmaster, it says 5 p.m. Eastern Time. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people couldn't make the race because of that. And this needs to be fixed. If you're going to maximize the LA market, maximize it like this. And then the last ugly thing, driver intros. That dude has not been funny since he was on Community, and even then, he wasn't the funniest guy on there. If you're going to get a comedian, you might as well get someone a little more edgy who can actually go all the way with jokes. Get Dave Chappelle. That'd be awesome. Now, those are just my thoughts. I want to hear what you think about the Clash. So let me know, what'd you think about this year's edition of the LA Clash? And while you're at it, let me know also, should it come back to LA? And when you're doing all that, be sure to leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to my channel for more great NASCAR content. Thank you so much to all my channel members for your continued support. And until next time, have a good one.